Welcome, my dear listeners, to another chilling episode with your host, Mr. Dark. Tonight, I bring you a story that will make your blood run cold. A tale of greed, terror, and the deadly secrets buried deep within a forgotten graveyard. What started as a reckless act of curiosity turned into a nightmare beyond imagination. 4 friends dared to disturb the dead, but little did they know the dead wouldn't let them leave unscathed. Stay with me as I unravel the harrowing events that unfolded when the restless sought revenge and shadows came alive. But beware. Once you hear this story, you may never look at a quiet cemetery the same way again. The rain had just stopped, leaving a thick mist hanging over the streets of Sheffield. In a crumbling flat on the city's outskirts, 4 young men gathered around a flickering bulb. The flat smelled of damp walls and stale cigarettes. Ryan, the self-proclaimed leader of the group, leaned forward with a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Boys, I've got a proper job for us this time," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. Sam, the cautious one, raised an eyebrow. "Another proper job, is it? Like the one where we nearly got nicked stealing from a car boot sale?" Ryan smirked, ignoring the jab. "This is different. It's easy money. I've found us a place where no one's watching, not even the police." Ethan, ever eager for the thrill, leaned closer. "Where?" Ryan hesitated for effect before answering. "The old cemetery near the industrial park." The room fell silent. Even Ethan, who thrived on risk, looked uncertain. Mo, the youngest and most superstitious, was the first to break the silence. "The cemetery? Mate, you've lost it. That place is cursed. Everyone knows weird things happen there." Ryan rolled his eyes. "Cursed? Don't be daft. It's just a load of old graves. But here's the thing. People bury valuables with their dead. I've seen fresh graves there, lads, and I bet the families weren't exactly skint." Sam crossed his arms. "You're talking about robbing the dead. That's different. Creepy." Ryan laughed. "Call it what you want, but it's easy pickings. There's no CCTV, no guards. Just us, a few shovels and some quick work. It's better than struggling for pennies, yeah?" The group exchanged uneasy glances. Sam looked like he wanted to argue, but stayed silent. Ethan, always eager to prove his mettle, shrugged. "I'm in. What's the worst that could happen?" Ryan grinned. "That's the spirit." Mo fidgeted nervously. "I don't know, man. Cemeteries are different. People say weird stuff happens in that one. Shadows, voices." Ryan clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Mo, you believe too much of that nonsense. Think of it this way. Whatever we find, we split 4 ways. A fresh grave could mean jewelry, watches, even cash. You don't want to miss out, do you?" Mo hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but if anything feels off, I'm out." "Good lad," Ryan said, slapping his back. "What about you, Sam?" Sam sighed, rubbing his temples. "I think this is a bad idea, but I can't let you lot go alone. Someone's got to keep you out of trouble." Ryan's grin widened. "That's settled then. We head out at midnight. Bring torches, gloves, and something to dig with." As the hour approached, the rain started again, a steady drizzle that soaked the city in gloom. Armed with spades and torches, the 4 of them crept toward the cemetery. They passed empty warehouses and abandoned streets, the eerie silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps splashing through puddles. The cemetery loomed ahead, its rusted gates half open, creaking in the wind. Inside, rows of gravestones jutted out of the earth like jagged teeth. A large oak tree stood in the center, its skeletal branches stretching out like arms reaching for the sky. Ryan turned to the group. "This is it. Stick close and keep quiet." Mo shivered, pulling his hood tighter. "I don't like this." "Stop whining," Ryan snapped. "We'll be in and out before anyone knows we were here." As they stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. The air felt heavy, suffocating. Mo glanced nervously at the shadows cast by their torches, his heart pounding with every creak of the gate behind them. Something about the place felt wrong, as if they weren't alone. They didn't notice the faint rustling among the graves. Not yet. But the graveyard was awake, and it had been waiting for them. The group moved deeper into the cemetery, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of wet grass and decay. Ryan led the way, his torchlight flickering as it swept over the rows of weathered gravestones. Each one bore names and dates long forgotten, etched into moss-covered stone. "This one," Ryan whispered, stopping in front of a fresh mound of earth. The grave was marked by a modest headstone, the date barely a week old. "This looks promising." Mo hesitated, hanging back. "What if the family comes back, or someone catches us?" Ryan scoffed, crouching beside the grave. "At this hour? Don't be stupid. Nobody's coming here. Not now, not ever." Ethan handed him a spade, his own grip tightening on the one he carried. "Let's get on with it. This place gives me the creeps." Sam stood a few steps away, his torch scanning the surrounding area. The mist clung to the ground, curling around the gravestones like ghostly fingers. He felt a chill creep down his spine, but said nothing. Ryan plunged the spade into the soil, the sound of metal against dirt echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. He worked quickly, tossing clumps of earth to the side. Ethan joined in, their movements hurried and almost frantic. Sam and Mo stood watch, their breaths visible in the cold night air. Minutes passed, then an hour. The pit grew deeper, the mound of displaced soil taller. Ryan's spade finally struck something solid. He froze, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. "Got it," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Ethan crouched beside him, brushing away the last layer of dirt with his gloved hands. A wooden coffin emerged, its surface rough and cracked from exposure to the damp earth. "Open it," Ryan said, his tone commanding but hesitant. Ethan hesitated. What if it's cursed or something?" Ryan rolled his eyes. "You're all scared of shadows. It's just a box with a body in it. Now help me." The two pried at the coffin lid, their tools slipping on the damp wood. After a few moments of struggle, the lid gave way with a groan. The stench of decay hit them first, a sickly, suffocating odor that made them gag. Inside lay a figure wrapped in a white shroud, its outline barely visible in the dim torchlight. A golden necklace gleamed against the fabric, catching Ryan's eye immediately. "Jackpot," he whispered, reaching in. The moment his fingers touched the necklace, the air around them grew colder. The torches flickered and dimmed. Mo, standing a few paces away, gasped. "Did you feel that?" he stammered. Ryan ignored him, yanking the necklace free. But as he pulled, his hand recoiled with a cry of pain. The chain had burned him, leaving angry red welts on his palm. "What the hell?" Ryan hissed, clutching his hand. Ethan glanced nervously at the body. The shroud had shifted, revealing a pale, almost luminous face. It was a woman, her features unnaturally pristine, as though untouched by death. Her eyes were closed, but her skin seemed to glow faintly in the torchlight. "That's not normal," Sam muttered, stepping back. Ethan reached out, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Maybe it's just cold metal. Let me try." The moment his fingers grazed the chain, the woman's eyes snapped open. White and featureless, they glowed with an unnatural light. Ethan screamed, stumbling backward and dropping his torch. The shrouded figure moved, her hand shooting out to grab Ethan's wrist. Her grip was inhumanly strong, her fingers cold as ice. Ethan thrashed and screamed, but she held him firm. "Get her off me!" he shrieked. Ryan and Sam rushed forward, grabbing Ethan and trying to pull him free. Mo stood frozen, his legs refusing to move. The woman's grip didn't waver. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. only a hollow, echoing wind that sent chills through their bones. Then the ground beneath them began to tremble. The grave shifted, soil pouring into the pit. The woman's grip tightened as she began to pull Ethan downward, her strength overwhelming. "Let go of him!" Ryan shouted, his voice cracking with fear. He swung the spade at her arm, but it passed through her like smoke, leaving no mark. Ethan's screams grew fainter as he was dragged deeper into the grave. His torch flickered and went out, plunging the group into near-total darkness. Sam grabbed Mo, snapping him out of his stupor. "Run!" Sam yelled. Ryan hesitated for a moment, staring at the pit where Ethan had disappeared. Then he turned and bolted after the others, his footsteps pounding against the uneven ground. Behind them, the sound of shifting earth and hollow whispers grew louder. They didn't stop running until they reached the cemetery gates. Ryan turned to look back, his chest heaving. The graveyard was silent again, the mist swirling peacefully around the gravestones. Ethan was gone. "We have to go back," Sam said, his voice shaking. "We can't just leave him." Ryan shook his head, his face pale. He's gone. There's nothing we can do." Mo leaned against the gate, his knees threatening to buckle. What was that thing? What the hell just happened? None of them had an answer. The cemetery, silent and still, offered none either. The rain had picked up again, a relentless downpour that soaked the three boys to the bone as they ran through the darkened streets. None of them spoke. The horror of what they had just witnessed weighed heavily on their minds. Ethan was gone, dragged into the earth by something none of them could explain. They reached their flat, slamming the door shut behind them. Mo collapsed onto the couch, his face pale and his hands trembling uncontrollably. Sam paced the small living room, his breathing ragged, while Ryan stood by the window, staring out at the rain-streaked glass. "We left him," Mo whispered, his voice barely audible. "We just left him there." Sam spun around, his face contorted with anger and fear. "What were we supposed to do, Mo? Fight that thing? Did you see what it did to Ethan?" "We could have tried something," Mo shot back, tears streaming down his face. "We didn't even try to save him." Ryan finally spoke, his voice cold and distant. "It wasn't human. There was nothing we could have done." Sam glared at him. "You're the one who got us into this mess. You said it'd be an easy job. No one would get hurt. Remember?" Ryan didn't reply. He couldn't. Deep down, he knew Sam was right. His greed had brought them to the cemetery, and now Ethan was gone, likely dead, or worse. Sam stopped pacing, running a hand through his wet hair. "We need to call someone. The police, maybe." "And tell them what?" Ryan snapped, finally turning away from the window. "That our mate got eaten by a ghost? They'll think we're on something, and then they'll arrest us for grave robbing." Sam clenched his fists, but said nothing. He knew Ryan was right. Even if they reported Ethan missing, they couldn't tell the truth about what had happened. Mo suddenly stood, his eyes wide with panic. What if it comes after us? What if that thing follows us here?" The room fell silent as the thought sank in. They hadn't considered the possibility, but now it seemed all too real. The cemetery was miles away, but the image of the glowing-eyed woman and the hollow whispers haunted their minds. "It won't," Ryan said, though his voice lacked conviction. It wanted Ethan. We got out. We'll be fine." Sam wasn't convinced. "You don't know that. You saw what it did. Whatever it was, it's not going to stop." The three of them fell into an uneasy silence, the rain hammering against the windows, the only sound in the room. Mo eventually curled up on the couch, his body shivering uncontrollably. Ryan stayed by the window, his eyes scanning the empty street outside. Sam sat in a chair, staring at the floor, his thoughts racing. The hours dragged by. The clock ticked past 3 a.m., then 4. None of them could sleep. Every creak of the old flat, every gust of wind outside made them jump. At some point, Mo dozed off, his quiet snores a small comfort in the otherwise oppressive silence. Ryan lit a cigarette, the ember glowing in the dim light. He didn't smoke often, but tonight he needed something to steady his nerves. He took a drag and exhaled, the smoke curling upward like the mist that had clung to the cemetery. His mind raced with questions he couldn't answer. What was that thing? Why had it taken Ethan? And more importantly, could it come for them next? Suddenly, a sharp knock echoed through the flat. The three of them froze. Mo jolted awake, his eyes darting around in confusion. Ryan put out his cigarette, his heart pounding. Sam stood slowly, motioning for the others to stay quiet. The knock came again, louder this time. It was deliberate and unnerving, the sound reverberating through the small flat. None of them moved. "Who is it?" Sam called out, his voice shaking. There was no response. Just the rain outside and the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner. "Don't open it," Mo whispered, his voice trembling. It could be her." Ryan shot him a glare, but didn't move toward the door. The knock came again, more insistent this time. Then the handle jiggled, as if someone or something was trying to open it. "Should we call the police?" Mo whispered frantically. Ryan shook his head. "And say what?" "That a ghost is knocking on our door." Sam grabbed a kitchen knife from the counter and approached the door cautiously. His hands trembled as he peered through the peephole. At first, he saw nothing but darkness. Then a face appeared, pale and distorted, pressed against the glass. Sam stumbled backward with a gasp. "It's her," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It's the woman from the grave," Mo whimpered, his back pressed against the wall. Ryan clenched his fists, trying to muster some semblance of control. "That's impossible. We're imagining things. We're just scared, that's all." But the knocking continued, growing louder, more insistent. The handle rattled violently, and the door frame creaked under the pressure. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. Sam crept back to the door and looked through the peephole again. The face was gone. The street outside was empty, save for the rain pooling in the gutters. "She's gone," he said, though his voice lacked relief. Ryan didn't respond. He turned back to the window, his eyes scanning the street. For a moment he thought he saw something moving in the shadows, a flicker of white like a shroud billowing in the wind. But when he blinked, it was gone. "We can't stay here," Mo said suddenly, his voice breaking. "We have to leave. Now." "To where?" Sam asked. "We're not safe anywhere. Not if it's following us." Ryan turned to face them, his expression grim. "We need to go back." "What?" Mo and Sam said in unison. "We need to go back to the cemetery," Ryan said, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Whatever's happening, it started there. If we don't figure it out, it won't stop. Not until it gets all of us." Ryan's declaration hung in the air like a death sentence. The idea of returning to the cemetery, a place that had swallowed Ethan and left them shaken to their cores, was unthinkable. Yet deep down, Sam and Mo knew he was right. Whatever had followed them home, it wasn't going to stop. "We're dead if we go back there," Mo stammered, shaking his head violently. "We barely made it out the first time. Ethan didn't make it at all." "We'll be dead if we don't," Ryan countered, his voice cold. "You saw what happened here. That thing, it knows where we live. It's only a matter of time before it comes back. We need to end this." Sam paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "And how exactly do you plan to end this, Ryan? Walk up to that thing and ask it to stop?" Ryan sighed, leaning against the counter. "I don't know. But there has to be something in that cemetery, something we missed. Maybe we disturbed it by opening that grave. Or maybe there's a way to put it back. We won't know unless we try. Sam wanted to argue but couldn't. Despite the fear clawing at his chest, he knew Ryan was right. They couldn't just wait for the next knock at the door, or worse. Mo, however, wasn't convinced. "I'm not going back there. You can't make me." Ryan shot him a steely glare. "Fine, stay here if you want, but don't expect it to spare you." That shut Mo up. He sat on the couch, trembling, his gaze fixed on the floor. After a long pause, he nodded reluctantly. "If we're going, we need to be prepared." The three of them spent the next hour gathering whatever they could find. Ryan grabbed a crowbar and a flashlight. Sam packed a kitchen knife and his phone, though he doubted either would be much help. Mo, shaking the entire time, carried a baseball bat he'd found under the couch. By the time they stepped outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The streets were eerily quiet, the city cloaked in a heavy fog. The walk to the cemetery felt longer than before, every shadow and faint noise making them jump. None of them spoke. When they reached the cemetery gates, the sight of the rusted metal sent a fresh wave of fear through them. The gate was closed now, the hinges squealing as Ryan pushed it open. The sound echoed in the still air, unnervingly loud. Inside, the cemetery looked almost peaceful. The mist curled around the gravestones like a shroud, and the great oak tree in the center stood as silent and imposing as before. But the air felt different, heavier, as if the graveyard itself was alive and watching. "Stick together," Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. They moved cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the fog. The grave they dug up loomed ahead, a gaping pit of darkness in the earth. Sam shuddered as the memory of Ethan being dragged down flashed in his mind. "This is madness," Mo muttered, gripping the bat tightly. "What are we even looking for?" "Anything," Ryan replied. "Something we can use to stop it. Something we missed the first time." As they approached the open grave, Sam noticed something strange. The shroud that had covered the woman's body was gone, along with the coffin lid. The pit was empty. "She's not here," Sam said, his voice trembling. Maybe it's over," Mo suggested weakly, though he didn't sound convinced. Ryan knelt by the edge of the grave, inspecting the soil. It was disturbed, as if something had crawled out. His flashlight flickered, and he cursed under his breath. "That's not a good sign," Sam said, his nerves fraying. "We need to get out of here." Before Ryan could respond, a low whisper floated through the air. It was faint at first, like the rustling of leaves, but it grew louder, surrounding them. The words were indistinct, but the tone was menacing. "Did you hear that?" Mo whispered, his eyes darting around. Ryan stood, gripping the crowbar tightly. "Stay close. Keep your eyes open." The whispers grew louder, blending into a cacophony of voices. They seemed to come from every direction, closing in on the three boys. Mo's flashlight flickered and went out, plunging him into darkness. He let out a terrified yelp, dropping the bat as he scrambled closer to Ryan and Sam. "What's happening?" Mo cried, his voice shaking. "I don't know," Ryan snapped, his own fear breaking through. Suddenly the whispers stopped, leaving a deafening silence. The boys stood frozen, their breaths shallow. Then, from the shadows, a figure emerged. It was her, the woman from the grave. She moved with an unnatural grace, her white dress billowing as though caught in an invisible wind. Her eyes glowed, empty and haunting, and her pale face was twisted into an expression of rage. In her hand, she held the golden necklace they had tried to take. Mo stumbled backward, his legs giving out beneath him. "It's her! She followed us!" The woman raised her hand, pointing directly at Ryan. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out, just the same hollow wind they'd heard before. The ground beneath Ryan's feet began to shift, the soil cracking as though something beneath it was waking up. "Run!" Sam yelled. grabbing Mo by the arm. The three of them bolted, their flashlights swinging wildly as they ran through the maze of gravestones. The whispers returned, louder and more frantic, chasing them through the fog. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and from the corners of their eyes they saw shadows moving. They reached the gates, only to find them closed. Ryan grabbed the bars, shaking them desperately. "It won't open! Climb!" Sam shouted, pushing Mo toward the gate. Mo scrambled up, his hands slipping on the wet metal. He reached the top and dropped down on the other side, turning to help Sam. Ryan was next, his heart pounding as he climbed. The whispers grew deafening, the fog swirling violently around them. As Ryan dropped to the ground, he turned to look back. The woman stood just beyond the gate, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Behind her, the shadows writhed, shapes moving in the mist. "She's not going to stop," Ryan whispered. The three of them sprinted through the darkened streets, the sound of their footsteps echoing in the night. The whispers had faded, but their presence lingered in the backs of their minds like a phantom, refusing to let go. By the time they reached the flat, all three were soaked in sweat, their breaths ragged. Ryan slammed the door shut behind them, bolting it with trembling hands. "She's not stopping," he muttered, pacing the room. "She's going to come for us. It doesn't matter where we go." Mo sank to the floor, his back pressed against the wall. "We're cursed," he said, his voice trembling. "We disturbed her grave. This is our punishment." Sam sat down heavily on the couch, rubbing his temples. "We need to figure out what she wants. She had the necklace. Why didn't she just take it and leave?" Ryan stopped pacing, turning to face them. "Maybe it's not about the necklace. Maybe it's about us." Mo looked up, his eyes wide. "What do you mean?" Ryan hesitated before speaking. "We dug up her grave. We woke her up. That kind of thing doesn't just go unnoticed. Maybe she wants revenge." "Revenge?" Mo's voice cracked. "For what? We didn't hurt her. We didn't even take anything." Sam's gaze hardened. "Ethan. She took Ethan. Maybe that's not enough." The room fell silent as the weight of Sam's words sank in. If the woman from the grave wanted more than one life, they might all be next. Ryan broke the silence. "We need answers. There has to be a reason why she's targeting us. Maybe we missed something in the cemetery." "You want to go back?" Mo shouted, his voice rising in panic. "We barely made it out alive, and you want to go back there?" Ryan shook his head. "Not to the cemetery. To someone who knows about it. There are people who deal with things like this." Sam frowned. "You mean like a priest?" "Not exactly," Ryan said. "There's this guy, an old bloke who runs the pawn shop near Moore Street. He's different. He knows things. Superstitions, curses, stuff like that. Maybe he can help." Mo's jaw dropped. "You want to ask some random old guy about the ghost of a woman we dug up? This is insane." "You have a better idea," Ryan snapped. Mo fell silent, his gaze dropping to the floor. None of them had a better idea. Without wasting more time, they grabbed their coats and headed out. The walk to Moore Street was tense, every shadow and faint sound putting them on edge. The fog from the cemetery seemed to follow them, clinging to the city streets like a malevolent presence. When they reached the pawn shop, it was almost dawn. The storefront was old and battered, its windows filled with an assortment of trinkets and antiques. A rusted sign above the door read, "Thompson's Curiosities." Ryan knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the quiet street. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, from inside, came the sound of shuffling feet. The door creaked open, revealing a wiry old man with sunken eyes and a face weathered by time. He squinted at them suspiciously. "We're closed," the man said gruffly. Ryan stepped forward. "Please, we need your help. It's about something supernatural." The man's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. Supernatural, you say? Ryan nodded. A cemetery. We saw something. Something we can't explain. The man stared at them for a moment, then sighed and opened the door wider. Come in, but you're paying for my time. The inside of the shop was cluttered and dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of old wood and incense. Shelves were lined with strange artifacts, bone charms, carved idols, and dusty books with faded covers. The man gestured for them to sit around a small table in the back. Start talking, he said, lighting a candle. The flickering flame cast eerie shadows across his face. Ryan recounted the events of the past 2 nights, the graveyard, the woman, Ethan's disappearance, and the terrifying pursuit. The man listened silently, his expression unreadable. When Ryan finished, the room fell silent. The old man leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You're fools," he said bluntly. "You disturbed something that was meant to be left alone." Mo's voice shook as he asked, "What? What was she?" The man sighed. "A guardian spirit, most likely. Some cultures believe in burying the dead with valuables, but not without protection. The necklace you saw, it wasn't just jewelry. It was an anchor, a tether to keep her bound to her grave. By touching it, you woke her up." Sam leaned forward. "How do we stop her?" The man's eyes darkened. "You don't. Spirits like her don't forgive. They don't forget. You've disrupted her rest. Now she'll do whatever it takes to make sure you pay." Mo's voice rose in panic. "But we didn't even take anything. Can't we, I don't know, put the necklace back?" "It's not that simple," the man said. "The necklace was never the issue. The moment you opened her grave, you invited her wrath. She's not after the necklace. She's after you." Ryan gritted his teeth. "There has to be a way, some kind of ritual or something." The man hesitated, then stood and rummaged through one of the shelves. He returned with a battered leather book, its pages yellowed with age. He flipped through it, muttering to himself. "There's a binding ritual," he said finally, "but it's dangerous. If you don't do it properly, it'll only make her stronger." "What do we need to do?" Ryan asked. The man pointed to a passage in the book. "You'll need to return to the cemetery, confront her, offer her something she values in exchange for her forgiveness." "Like what?" Sam asked. The man's gaze was cold. "Life." The old man's words hung in the air, a sinister weight pressing down on the room. Mo's face drained of color. "Life?" he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "Whose life?" The old man shrugged, his eyes cold and detached. "That's up to her. Spirits like these don't bargain lightly. They demand something of equal value for what was taken. You disturbed her rest, and you've already paid with your friend's life. If you want to stop her, you'll have to give her more." Sam shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is insane. You're saying we just sacrifice someone to save ourselves?" "That's how these things work," the man said. "It's not fair, but the dead don't care about fairness." Ryan clenched his fists, his mind racing. "There has to be another way. What about the binding ritual you mentioned? Can't we just use that?" The man shook his head. "The ritual isn't a guarantee. It's complicated, and if you make even the slightest mistake, it could backfire. Spirits this powerful don't just fade away because you chant a few words." "So we're screwed no matter what," Sam muttered, running a hand through his hair. Mo, who had been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. "What if we just leave? Get as far away as we can. Maybe she won't follow." The old man chuckled darkly. "You think you can outrun her? She's not bound by the rules of the living. You could flee to the other side of the world and she'd still find you. Spirits like her don't stop until their anger is satisfied." Ryan paced the small room, his jaw tight. If we offer her something, how do we know she'll stop? What if she just keeps coming after us? The man closed the book with a snap. You don't. That's the risk you take, but right now you don't have many options. Either you face her and try to bargain, or you wait for her to come for you. Your choice. The room fell silent. Sam stared at the floor, his thoughts a chaotic mess. Mo looked like he might faint at any moment. Ryan finally stopped pacing, his expression hardening. We'll do it. We'll go back. Sam and Mo both looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Are you serious? Sam asked. You're willing to sacrifice someone to save yourself? Ryan's jaw tightened. I'm not saying we'll actually do it, but if we don't go back, we're dead anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to figure something out. Mo shook his head violently. No way. I'm not going back there, I can't. Ryan grabbed him by the shoulders, forcing him to look into his eyes. Listen to me, Mo. We don't have a choice. If we stay here, she'll come for us. Do you want to end up like Ethan? Mo's lips quivered, but he didn't respond. Ryan let go of him, turning to the old man. What do we need for the ritual? The man handed him the book. Everything's in here. You'll need candles, salt, and something to draw a protective circle. But most importantly, you'll need the necklace. Without it, the ritual won't work. Sam's eyes widened. The necklace? You mean the one she's holding? How the hell are we supposed to get that back? The man shrugged. That's your problem. If you're not willing to take the risk, don't bother trying the ritual. Ryan took the book, his hands shaking slightly. Fine, we'll get it. Somehow. The man nodded, his expression grim. Good luck. You're going to need it. The walk back to the cemetery was deathly quiet. The city felt different, as if it were holding its breath. The fog seemed thicker, the air colder. None of them spoke. Even Mo, who had been the most vocal about his fear, trudged along in silence, his eyes downcast. As they reached the cemetery gates, the three of them stopped. The sight of the rusted iron bars sent a wave of dread through them. Ryan clutched the book tightly, his knuckles white. This is it, he said. We go in, get the necklace and perform the ritual. If it works, we'll be free. And if it doesn't? Mo asked, his voice barely audible. Ryan didn't answer. The gates creaked as they pushed them open, the sound echoing through the still air. The cemetery was eerily silent, the fog swirling around the gravestones like restless spirits. The great oak tree loomed ahead, its skeletal branches casting long shadows across the ground. They made their way toward the grave they had disturbed, their flashlights barely piercing the darkness. The open pit was still there, a gaping wound in the earth. But this time, they weren't alone. She was waiting for them. The woman stood by the edge of the grave, her glowing eyes fixed on them. Her white dress billowed in an unseen wind, the golden necklace hanging from her hand. She didn't move, but her presence was suffocating. Ryan stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. We came to fix this, he said, his voice shaking. We didn't mean to disturb your rest. Let us put things right. The woman tilted her head slightly, as if considering his words. Then she raised her free hand, pointing directly at Ryan. The ground beneath him trembled, cracks spreading through the soil. Ryan, move! Sam shouted, pulling him back just as the ground caved in. The woman's lips parted, but instead of words, a hollow wind poured out, chilling them to the bone. The whispers returned, louder this time, circling them like a storm. We need the necklace, Ryan yelled, his voice barely audible over the noise. Sam, distract her. What? How? Sam shouted back. Just do something. Ryan grabbed the book and began flipping through its pages, his hands trembling. Sam looked around desperately, then picked up a loose stone from the ground. Oi! He shouted, throwing it at the woman. The stone passed through her like smoke, but it caught her attention. She turned toward Sam, her glowing eyes narrowing. The whispers grew louder, the fog thickening around him. Mo screamed as shadows began to emerge from the ground, twisted, human-like figures with glowing white eyes. They moved toward him, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Ryan, hurry!" Sam shouted, backing away as the woman advanced toward him. Ryan found the passage he was looking for and began reading aloud, his voice shaking but determined. The words felt strange on his tongue, heavy and unfamiliar. As he chanted, the shadows hesitated, their movements slowing. The woman turned back to Ryan, her expression furious. The necklace in her hand began to glow, pulsing with a sinister light. "Keep going!" Sam shouted, trying to fend off the shadows with a broken branch. Ryan's voice grew louder, the chant filling the air. The ground trembled, and the whispers turned into wails. The woman's figure began to flicker, her form growing less solid. But it wasn't enough. She raised the necklace high, and the shadows surged forward, their glowing eyes fixed on Ryan. The shadows closed in like a wave of darkness, their glowing eyes fixed on Ryan as he continued to chant. His voice faltered, trembling under the weight of fear, but he forced himself to keep going. The air grew colder with each word, the fog thickening into a choking shroud. Sam swung his makeshift weapon wildly, but it passed through the shadows as if they weren't there. "Ryan, it's not working," he yelled, panic clear in his voice. Ryan didn't stop. He clutched the book tightly, his fingers tracing the ancient words on the page. "Hold them off! Just hold them off!" Mo, frozen with terror, cowered near a gravestone, his bat lying forgotten at his feet. One of the shadowy figures turned toward him, its movements unnatural and jerky. It reached out a hand, skeletal fingers extending toward his face. "No!" Mo screamed, scrambling backward until he hit the cold stone of the grave marker. The shadow loomed over him, its empty gaze burning into his soul. Sam charged at the figure, swinging the branch with all his strength. It passed through the shadow again, but this time the figure seemed to hesitate. Its form flickered, wavering in the air. "They're weak!" Sam shouted. "Keep chanting, Ryan!" Ryan's voice grew louder, the words flowing from him in a desperate rhythm. The shadows faltered, their forms becoming less solid. But the woman at the grave remained strong, her glowing eyes fixed on Ryan. The necklace in her hand pulsed with an unnatural light, casting eerie shadows across the ground. "You can't stop this," a voice whispered, cold and hollow. It wasn't Ryan or Sam, it was her. The woman's mouth moved, though the words seemed to come from everywhere at once. "You disturbed my rest. You must pay." Ryan's chant wavered, his confidence faltering. The woman raised the necklace higher, and the shadows surged forward again, more forceful than before. They surrounded Ryan, their cold presence pressing against him. Sam rushed to his side, grabbing his arm. "Ryan, we have to go. It's not working." Ryan looked up, his eyes wide with desperation. "We can't run. If we leave, she'll follow us. She'll never stop." Sam tightened his grip on Ryan's arm. "Then what do we do?" Ryan's gaze flicked to the necklace, still clutched in the woman's hand. "The necklace. It's the key. If we destroy it—" "How?" Sam interrupted. "We can't even get close to her." Ryan didn't have an answer. He turned back to the book, flipping through the pages frantically. His flashlight flickered, its beam growing dimmer. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, vibrating with the force of the woman's anger. Mo, still huddled by the gravestone, finally found his voice. "She's too strong. We're going to die here." Ryan ignored him, his eyes scanning the text. Then he found it, an entry about severing a spirit's anchor to the living world. His heart raced as he read the instructions. "We need to trap her. If we can contain her for long enough, the necklace will lose its power." "And how do we trap her?" Sam asked, glancing nervously at the advancing shadows. Ryan pointed to the grave. We lure her back in. That's where she's weakest, where she's bound. Mo shook his head violently. No way. I'm not going anywhere near that grave. Ryan turned to him, his expression fierce. If we don't, we're all dead. Do you want to end up like Ethan? Mo hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but you better have a plan. Ryan grabbed a stick from the ground and began drawing a large circle around the grave. He used the salt he had brought to trace the lines, murmuring a prayer under his breath. The woman watched him silently, her glowing eyes narrowing. Sam positioned himself between Ryan and the shadows, swinging his branch defensively. Hurry up, Ryan. They're getting closer. Ryan finished the circle and turned to Mo. We need to get her into the trap. Once she's inside, she can't hurt us. Mo glanced at the woman, his fear evident. And how do we do that? Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he picked up a loose stone and threw it at the woman. It passed through her like smoke, but her attention snapped to him instantly. The whispers grew louder, filled with anger. Run! Ryan shouted, darting toward the grave. The woman followed, her movements smooth and unnatural. The shadows surged forward, but Sam and Mo managed to keep them at bay long enough for Ryan to reach the edge of the trap. Come on, Ryan yelled, waving his arms to taunt her. You want me? Here I am. The woman floated closer, her glowing eyes locking onto him. She stepped into the circle without hesitation. The moment she crossed the line of salt, Ryan began chanting again. The air inside the circle shimmered, the energy crackling like static electricity. The woman's form flickered, her figure becoming less solid. It's working, Ryan shouted, his voice rising with hope. But the woman wasn't finished. She raised the necklace high, her voice echoing in a deafening wail. The ground beneath them shook violently, the circle cracking under the strain. Sam grabbed Ryan's arm. She's breaking free! We need to stop her now! Ryan reached for the crowbar he had brought, his hands trembling. He locked eyes with the woman, her gaze filled with rage and sorrow. I'm sorry, he whispered, then swung the crowbar at the necklace. The impact sent a shockwave through the air. The necklace shattered, its golden links scattering across the ground. The woman let out an unearthly scream, her form disintegrating into a cloud of mist. The shadows froze, then dissolved into the air. The cemetery fell silent. Ryan dropped the crowbar, his legs giving out beneath him. Sam and Mo stood motionless, their faces pale. The graveyard was still, the oppressive energy gone. It's over, Ryan whispered, though he didn't sound convinced. The three of them stared at the shattered remains of the necklace, unsure if they had truly won, or if they had just unleashed something far worse. The silence in the cemetery was deafening, broken only by the labored breaths of the three boys. The mist lingered but no longer felt alive, no longer pressed against their skin like an unseen predator. The shattered fragments of the necklace glinted faintly in the pale light of their flashlights. We did it, Mo whispered, his voice trembling. It's gone. She's gone. Ryan wasn't so sure. He remained crouched near the grave, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The woman's scream still echoed in his mind, a sound that seemed to reverberate in the very marrow of his bones. Sam approached cautiously, his grip on the branch still tight. Ryan, say something. Did it work? Ryan stood slowly, his legs shaky beneath him. I think so, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The necklace was her anchor. Without it, she shouldn't be able to harm us. Mo let out a shaky laugh, his relief palpable. Then let's get out of here. I don't want to spend another second in this place. Sam nodded, but his expression was still tense. What about Ethan? Should we try to find him? Ryan turned to look at the grave, its gaping darkness now silent and still. "He's gone," he said quietly. "Whatever happened to him, we can't change it. We have to leave." Mo didn't argue. He picked up his bat and moved toward the cemetery gates, eager to put as much distance between himself and the graveyard as possible. Sam lingered for a moment, his eyes fixed on the grave. "We'll never forget this, will we?" "No," Ryan replied. "We won't." The journey back to their flat felt surreal. The city seemed unnaturally quiet, as if the world itself had paused to catch its breath. The fog had lifted, revealing empty streets bathed in the faint glow of streetlights. The boys walked in silence, their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Mo broke the silence first. "Do you think it's really over? Like for good?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. He wanted to believe it was over, but the memory of the woman's glowing eyes and her final scream made him uneasy. "I don't know," he admitted, "but we did everything we could." Mo frowned. "That's not very reassuring." Sam glanced at Ryan. "You're thinking about what the old man said, aren't you? About how these things don't forgive." Ryan nodded grimly. "We destroyed the necklace, but we don't know what that really means. Maybe we ended her hold on this world, or maybe we just set her free." Mo stopped walking, his face pale. "Set her free? You're saying she could still come back?" Ryan turned to face him, his expression hard. "I don't know, Mo, but standing here won't change anything. Let's get back to the flat and figure out what to do next." Reluctantly, Mo followed, though the fear in his eyes hadn't diminished. When they finally reached the flat, it was nearly dawn. The sky was beginning to lighten, casting a pale grey glow over the city. They entered quietly, locking the door behind them. The small living room felt claustrophobic after the vast emptiness of the cemetery. Mo collapsed onto the couch, his head in his hands. "I can't do this anymore. I just want it to stop." Sam sat down beside him, his gaze distant. "We shouldn't have gone there. None of this would have happened if we'd just left that place alone." Ryan stood by the window, staring out at the empty street. "It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. We just have to hope that destroying the necklace was enough." For a while, none of them spoke. The weight of everything they had experienced pressed down on them, making the air in the room feel thick and suffocating. Mo eventually drifted into a fitful sleep, his body exhausted from the night's events. Sam stayed awake, his eyes fixed on the floor. What if she comes back, Ryan? What if it wasn't enough? Ryan didn't turn from the window. "Then we'll deal with it. Somehow." Sam sighed, leaning back against the couch. "You say that like it's going to be easy." "It won't be," Ryan admitted. "But we don't have a choice." It was nearing mid-morning when the first sign of trouble appeared. Ryan was the first to notice it. He had been dozing off in a chair near the window when a faint sound jolted him awake. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But then he heard it again, a soft, rhythmic tapping like fingernails against glass. He turned slowly, his heart pounding. The sound was coming from the window. "Sam," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Wake up." Sam stirred, groaning softly. "What is it?" Ryan didn't answer. He pointed to the window, his hand trembling. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. Mo woke with a start, looking around in confusion. "What's going on?" Mo asked, his voice thick with sleep. The tapping stopped abruptly. The room fell silent, the air heavy with tension. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, plunging the flat into darkness. "Not again," Sam muttered, grabbing the branch he had brought back from the cemetery. The tapping resumed, but this time it was louder, angrier. The window rattled under the force of it. Ryan grabbed a flashlight and shone it at the glass. A face stared back at him. It was the woman. Her glowing eyes bored into his, filled with fury. The mist had returned, swirling around her pale figure like a living thing. "She's here," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible. Mo screamed, scrambling backward and knocking over a lamp. Sam stood frozen, his grip on the branch tightening. The woman raised her hand, pressing it against the glass. Cracks spider-webbed across the surface, spreading outward like veins. The tapping turned into a deafening pounding, shaking the entire window frame. "What do we do?" Mo cried, his voice shrill with panic. Ryan didn't have an answer. The necklace was destroyed. The graveyard was miles away. And yet, she had found them. The glass shattered, and the mist poured into the room. The mist surged into the room like a living entity, swirling around the boys with a suffocating chill. The woman followed, stepping through the shattered window, as if the shards were nothing more than air. Her glowing eyes burned with fury, and her pale form seemed to flicker between solid and spectral. Mo screamed, retreating into a corner as the mist wrapped around his legs. Sam swung the branch wildly, but it passed through her like smoke, accomplishing nothing. Ryan stumbled backward, clutching the old book tightly. "She's not bound anymore," Sam yelled, his voice barely audible over the wailing wind that accompanied her. Destroying the necklace didn't stop her, it set her free. Ryan's mind raced as the woman advanced, her gaze fixed solely on him. He realized Sam was right. The necklace hadn't been her prison, it had been her tether, anchoring her to the graveyard. Without it, she was unbound, free to pursue them wherever they went. "Get back!" Ryan shouted, grabbing a chair and throwing it at her. It splintered against the wall, passing through her incorporeal form. The woman raised her hand, and the mist thickened, coiling around Ryan's chest and pulling him to the ground. He gasped for air, his lungs burning as if the fog itself were alive. Sam rushed forward, grabbing Ryan's arm and yanking him free. "We need a plan, Ryan. What do we do?" Ryan clutched the book, his mind racing. There had to be something they missed, some way to stop her. His eyes scanned the pages, desperate for an answer. Then he saw it, a passage about binding a spirit to a physical object. "The mirror," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "What?" Sam asked, struggling to fend off the shadows creeping closer. Ryan pointed to the mirror hanging on the wall. "It's the only way. If we can trap her inside something reflective, we can bind her again." "That's insane!" Mo cried from the corner. "How are we supposed to trap her?" "We don't have a choice," Ryan snapped. He grabbed the mirror from the wall, nearly dropping it as the mist lashed out at him. "Sam, distract her." Sam nodded, though his fear was evident. He grabbed the flashlight and shone it directly at the woman. The beam passed through her, but she flinched slightly, her glowing eyes narrowing. The mist recoiled momentarily, giving Ryan a chance to act. He held the mirror out, positioning it between himself and the woman. "You want us, don't you?" he shouted. "Then come and get me." The woman's gaze snapped to him, her fury intensifying. She moved toward Ryan with inhuman speed, her figure blurring as the mist surged forward like a tidal wave. The mirror vibrated in Ryan's hands, the reflective surface glowing faintly as her form drew closer. "Hold it steady!" Sam yelled, using the flashlight to fend off the encroaching shadows. Ryan gritted his teeth, his arms shaking under the weight of the mirror. The woman raised her hand, the mist forming claw-like tendrils that lashed out at him. One struck his arm, leaving a searing, icy pain in its wake, but he didn't let go. As the woman reached the mirror, her glowing eyes locked onto its surface. For a moment she hesitated, as if realizing what was happening. Then, with a deafening scream, she was pulled forward, her form collapsing into the reflective surface like water being sucked down a drain. The room shook violently as the mist spiraled into the mirror, the light from her eyes fading into its depths. Ryan felt the weight in his arms shift, and then, just as suddenly as it had started, the chaos stopped. The room was silent, Ryan, Sam, and Mo stared at the mirror in stunned silence. The surface, once dull and cracked, now shimmered faintly with an eerie glow. The woman's face flickered briefly in the reflection, her expression one of rage and sorrow, before disappearing entirely. "Is it over?" Mo whispered, his voice trembling. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He placed the mirror gently on the floor, his hands still shaking. "She's in there," he said finally. "Bound. For now." "For now?" Sam repeated, his tone sharp. "What do you mean, for now? Isn't it permanent?" Ryan shook his head. "Spirits like her, they're never truly gone. We've trapped her, but if the mirror breaks, she'll be free again." Mo's eyes widened in panic. "Then what do we do with it? We can't just keep it here." Ryan nodded. "We'll bury it. Somewhere deep. Somewhere no one will find it." Sam picked up the mirror carefully, holding it as though it might shatter at any moment. "Let's do it now. I don't want this thing in the flat any longer than it has to be." The three of them made their way out of the flat, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the fog. They walked in silence, carrying the mirror to a remote stretch of woodland on the city's outskirts. The air felt lighter, freer, but none of them dared to relax. Ryan dug the hole himself, his hands blistering from the effort. When it was deep enough, he placed the mirror inside, covering it with soil. He stepped back, breathing heavily as Sam and Mo helped pack the dirt down. "Is that it?" Mo asked, his voice still shaking. Ryan nodded. "That's it. No one will ever find her here." They stood in silence for a moment, staring at the freshly dug earth. Then, without a word, they turned and walked away. Weeks passed, and life slowly returned to normal. The boys avoided the cemetery and spoke little of what had happened. But the memories lingered, haunting their dreams and casting long shadows over their days. Ryan found himself unable to look at mirrors for too long, afraid he might see her face staring back at him. Sam threw himself into work, trying to distract himself from the weight of what they had done. Mo moved out of the flat entirely, choosing to leave Sheffield behind. But no matter how far they ran, the events of that night stayed with them, and deep in the woods, beneath the soil, the mirror waited, its surface faintly glowing in the darkness. And so, my dear listeners, this tale ends, but the terror lingers on. The graveyard, the vengeful spirit, and the mirror buried deep in the woods, these are no longer just the stories of those four reckless souls. They serve as a chilling reminder to all of us. Some places are best left undisturbed. If this story left you with chills, if you felt the shadows creeping around you, then you're exactly where you need to be. Hit that subscribe button to join me, Mr. Dark, for more spine-tingling tales of the paranormal, the mysterious, and the unexplained. Don't forget to like this video, leave a comment below with your thoughts, and share it with someone who loves a good scare. Who knows? They might think twice before setting foot in an abandoned cemetery. Until next time, stay curious and stay afraid.